Because she's got a great ass. And you've got your head all the way up in it.
That was damn good. It's Michael Mann, people. Hi, this is Karan from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles, and welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In this episode, we'll cover a filmmaker, in this case a director, who shaped our love of film. So like you said, Karan, and maybe folks picked up on my Al Pacino impression and can remember that great line from Heat. We're talking about Michael Mann today. This to get a Ferrari coming out on Christmas Day. Both of us are excited about that one. So we thought it was the perfect opportunity to go back and look at all of his full filmography and talk about how he shaped our love of film. So do you want to start, Karan, and then I can give my thoughts on Mann?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of our seminal filmmakers, and especially for, I think, you and I, like 90s kids, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. And as we'll get to, like his 90s run is sort of unmatched in his storytelling and filmmaking, and in many ways sort of captures, even though I was not living in this country, but it captures like America as sort of, big and bold and powerful and moving fast and movie stars and iconic lines like the one you just covered. Like all that is, to me, very much Hollywood, very much America, even from the outside. And that's sort of what Michael Mann has always represented to me. Movies that are larger than life, entertaining, but have something to say, are epic in their scope, but they're not fantastical. They're always rooted pretty much in present time, barring a few exceptions. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mohicans is sure in there, but I don't, think of him as like a period filmmaker. These are contemporary movies dealing with
Mm-hmm.
contemporary issues, a bit exaggerated, a bit over the top in acting and storytelling and music and all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, a great time at the movies essentially is what I associate Mann with. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely second all the things you mentioned. I mean, for me, he's one of the most important directors, not only because I like love all of his films and have seen them many, many times, but it's his sense of visual style. And then he puts
Hmm.
such an onus on the mise en scène, which is a term we've covered before. It basically means, the shot composition, what's in the shot, the editing techniques, the music and some of his sequences that he's put on film. I mean, honestly, most of his movies contain at least one scene that is one of my favorite scenes put on film. Like if I
Right.
were to look at like my top 20 scenes ever made, like half of them would be Michael Mann. And it all just goes down his eye. And he was really the one that opened my eyes up, no pun intended, to the power of like what a cinematographer does and how shot composition works and
Mm.
how you can use the framing and the placement of objects within the shot to be on the theme and to stick with the message. I mean, Insider was really the first film of his that I saw where my whole eyes were opened up to this whole new world of how to look at film. It's one of the most, we covered it on the podcast before, but it's definitely one of the most important films to me that opened up not only my love of cinema, but then going back and watching all these Michael Mann films and following his career ever since then with each film. And I think too, what makes him such a singular artist is he has a very specific like vision and theme in every movie. It's always a male
Mhm.
protagonist who has a very specific set of rules and morals that he lives by, and those are tested. But he has to push back against the world. It's him against the
Right.
world. It's a very lonely, isolated protagonist.
Troubled guy.
Troubled, yeah, troubled men, but they're really holding on to something, and that is challenged by everything else around them. And I find that very fascinating. The character studies he gives a lot of great actors, a lot of great performances.
Hmm.
We talked about Russell Crowe and Pacino in The Insider, but Daniel Day-Lewis and Last of the Mohicans, and Miami Vice with Colin Farrell. Like these are really meaty parts but there's not a lot there, which I think is great too. Like on paper, they're very thin, but he gives these characters weight through the visual style that he has and very
Right.
subtle things. It's very subtle, but at the same time, like you were saying earlier, very melodramatic and big and bold. It's not done through dialogue. He's a very visual filmmaker, and that resonates a lot with me. Just as I love the and pay attention a lot to the visuals. That's why Michael Mann always ticks all my boxes. But I just yeah, he's just a singular talent, like you said, and one of the best American filmmakers working today. I cannot wait for Ferrari to zoom into theaters on Christmas Day.
Yeah. And when you sing like iconic sequences, I was thinking about that they're so varied, right? From like a sit down diner scene to car chases to kind of, epic sort of battle sequences the way
Hmm.
Mohicans has. So it's a pretty varied sense of iconic sequences, which is also kind of amazing. And then on
Hmm.
the actor part, like you're right, there's not much dialogue, although there are lines and monologues, like Christopher Plummer's monologue from The Insider
Oh,
is
yes. Amazing.
amazing
Yeah.
and such. But I can tell that even though this is like an action filmmaker, that's kind of how I classify
Oh,
him.
interesting. Okay.
But I still think that there's a lot of great collaboration between him and his actors to kind of really find the character. And yes, it's visual, but it's the actors really bring it. Like it's not
Hmm.
just your, I mean, you could say that what's his face, the Transformers guy, the
Michael
director.
Bay. Michael
Right.
Bay.
You could sort of say that, oh, Michael Bay is kind of operating in a similar register like
Hmm.
action movies, but I wouldn't call him a director's actor. And I think that's
Right.
a big difference amongst many other differences between the two, where
Hmm.
I think Mann really cares about his actors and the collaboration there and what these actors bring to the table. I mean, for all the actors that you mentioned, Michael Mann's movies are in their kind of pantheon of movies.
Right. Right. Some of their best performances
Right.
he's got out of them. Yes. And
Tom Cruise, probably one of his best
oh, oh, for
performances.
sure. In Collateral, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think too, when I mentioned like not a lot of dialogue, I think it's they're very key scenes in the film where he has to convey what the character is going through, and it's usually silent. I mean, there's
Right.
music, but it's usually very contemplative, typically with the character in water or looking out at water, being near
Yeah.
a body of water. And there's a scene from Thief where he's sitting out looking in front of Lake Michigan, and Manhunter, they're sitting on a beach, and these scenes that are not much going on, but everything is going on, and
Right.
that's what I just love about Man. It's not spelled out, but it's all there, and a lot of it comes through the actors and what
Yeah.
their performances are. Like a scene we talked about in our episode about The Insider, when Russell Crowe's kind of sitting there in the chair and thinking back to everything that he left behind
Right.
with his daughter and everything. He's not saying anything, but you can see it in his face, like what are the weight of his decisions of going up against the tobacco company, basically losing his family. Like what would that was the cost worth it to him? And you can see it all just in his performance. But he definitely is an actor's director for sure. And that's why
Yeah.
I think why he attracts the top talent. I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
he's been with every, kind of A-list male talent. I mean, I will say he's not, just doesn't make movie about female characters. He just
No.
he just doesn't. That's not in his wheelhouse. It's not, I think, something to fault him for. That's not
No.
who he is as a
No.
director. It's always there's some strong female characters in his movies,
Right.
but they're centered always around a troubled male in some way, whether it's, usually a cop or a criminal or because those guys have codes. These
Yeah.
people have to have some kind of code that they're
They're
testing
fighting
against the world.
against. Yeah.
Exactly. They're fighting for, right, against everything else.
Yeah.
Just an amazing filmmaker.
I also associate him with just a lot of cool and sexiness, right? Like
Mm,
these movies are I think it kind of comes from the visual style, but also because he always casts these like, male leads who are immaculately presented to you. I mean, they are usually beautiful people presented to
hmm.
you, even though flawed and such, but there's a lot of
Right.
style to the movie making. The movies are sexy. The music also, though melodramatic, kind of amps up the sex appeal. There's a lot of like saxophone and
Hmm.
beats going on and such, which in The Insider I was very distracted by. I
Oh,
can never forget. La, 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 la,
yeah, one of my favorite
la.
favorite soundtracks of all time. But
I
yeah,
just can't
yeah.
get that out of my head and not
Yeah.
laugh. But there's a lot of sexy, I think, to his movies.
No, that's actually a good point. And, as we get into his filmography, we will talk about his films,
Yeah.
but he also had a major cultural resonance on television. Now, he executive produced Miami Vice, the TV show in the 80s that really did change the game for TV forever. And he
Mhm.
did bring in style and substance. I won't say style over substance. He has style
Right.
and substance, but style was missing from TV, from drama TV. Nothing had ever been done that was done in Miami Vice, which is a show I've not seen. I have seen the pilot, the extended pilot episodes, like 90 minutes. He didn't direct it, but he EP'd
Right.
it. And a lot of the decisions that were made were not his. They were the director of that episode. But it is like a Big Bang goes. I mean, that show is so different than anything else that's been on TV. That it's that coolness that you mentioned. I think he brings that
Yeah.
into all of his films too. There is this cool slickness. It's a lot of style, but there's so much substance to all those
Right.
style choices. It's not just empty style. Like, you
Right.
brought up Michael Bay already.
Right.
He's got a lot of style, but there's nothing behind that. And,
Right.
that's why sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But with
Right.
Michael Mann, there is a coolness, a slickness, this sense of style. There's a lot to it and there's a lot behind it.
I totally agree. Okay. Should we jump into filmography?
Yeah, let's do that. And for folks who haven't listened to these episodes before, what we do now is go over the entire, in this case, directors, filmography, and break it into what we think are phases. I mean, every artist has different phases that they go through. So with Michael Mann, we have three of them, and we're going to jump into the first phase now, which we think or does begin with Jericho Mile, which was a TV movie, but his first full-length feature that he directed, and then ends with Manhunter. So it's Jericho Mile, Thief, The Keep, and Manhunter. So this is him starting out. Now he has a style pretty much from the get-go, honestly. Like Thief still looks like the Michael Mann we know today. It's not like he
Mm,
needed to develop his style, but he was taking the style and putting it in a lot of different genres. Jericho Mile is a prison drama. Thief is a crime drama. The Keep is a supernatural thriller, and Manhunter is a serial killer film. And
mm,
his technique is his the sense of style, the sense of coolness is given in all three of these films. And well, too, I think it's worth pointing out that the Thief, Manhunter, and the Keep all did use these synth scores. So he
mm,
partnered with synth artists at the time to have a fully synthesized score, which is something that was not as prevalent as it is today. Obviously, there's a lot of movies do this, but it was again bringing music into this and making these films feel more alive. These very interesting scores. Which I mean, the Thief score by Tangerine Dream, which is a pop act. I mean, I listen to that all the time and
mm,
it's just such a it works really well in that movie of setting up this cool like MTV like ethos
mm.
because of the soundtrack. So have you seen any of these films? We can talk more about some of them if you haven't.
No, I haven't seen any of them, but I'd love kind of if I were to prioritize watching any of these, which ones should I watch
Yeah,
first?
so yeah. I think these also like for listeners, I mean, you might have heard of some of these films, but they're not his most iconic or most popular films. So if you're kind of looking for a guide to, I would definitely recommend starting with Manhunter, which is his
Mm,
adaptation of the Thomas Harris book Red Dragon. This is actually the
mm.
first time Hannibal Lecter's been on screen before Silence of the Lambs. So played
Ah,
brilliantly by Brian Cox. Like, yes, Anthony Hopkins, that's an iconic performance, but there is a little bit of a goofiness to it. His performance is a little cartoonish in what he does, whereas Brian Cox, it's chillingly like real and grounded and terrifying in a way that
mm,
even like the Anthony Hopkins, again, one of the greatest performances of all time. I'm not trying to slag it off, but
mm,
it's a different vibe that I think Manhunter's a much scarier film. It's got again one sequence towards the end where they're trying to catch the criminal and he's about to kill this woman. Set to Inagana Davida, the
mm,
60s pop like rock song that is just absolutely chilling. Just an incredible film, and something that, again that to mention with Michael Mann is he frequently goes back and redoes his films, his director's cuts, and I highly recommend the director's cut of Manhunter, which is much better than the theatrical version that I would definitely recommend checking out.
yeah, that's
Um,
good to know.
yeah, that one definitely. And also, honestly, the Jericho Mile, his first film, which is like a prison drama about a runner who is sent to prison and he, could have qualified for the Olympics. And it's sort of a testament of, again, one man sort of standing up against, the criminal system and has a very, very powerful end montage set to a Rolling Stones song that is
Mm,
incredible. And it's his first, I actually took me a while to track this movie down. I think it was released theatrically overseas but only aired on TV in the US in the 70s, back when TV movies meant something. Spielberg directed TV movies. I mean, this was like a medium you could really sink your teeth into, and like today, where they're all like, kind
mm,
of bad. But it's definitely worth hunting down. It's now on Blu-ray. You can get it. And I was just blown away by how powerful it was. And a lot of the themes of what Michael Mann's whole career are laid out in this first movie. And the style's not there yet. It's definitely, much more straightforward in terms of the style unlike Thief, but I that's the other one I'd recommend. I mean, honestly, all
mm,
these except for The Keep is not good. The Keep is not good. Michael Mann disowned it basically. Like it's hard to track down. There's no HD transfer.
mm.
I've only seen it once. That's definitely his worst film, so I would avoid that. But the other three in here, I definitely would check out.
Okay, good to know. The other thing it struck me as you were talking about, even though I've not seen these movies, I've seen obviously the other Michael Mann movies. There seems to be like a parallel between him and Fincher in
Hmm.
the sense of like style and substance, but
Yeah.
also kind of this music video quality of like music is a really important part. It's often paired with the visuals and used for dramatic effect from a storytelling standpoint. So I don't know. What do you think of that? It just struck me right now.
Yeah, no, I think there is some parallels to give or to make between those two directors. It's interesting actually, Fincher came up, like we mentioned in our Fincher episode, through music
Yeah,
videos and commercials, and
right.
that was not Michael Mann's original background. Like he's gone on to direct some of my favorite commercials of all time, but
Mm,
that's not where he came from. But I wonder if Fincher was inspired a lot by what Michael brought, especially into, they even called like Miami Vice was called MTV Cops. Like that was a nickname for it. And maybe
mm,
even how they sold the show because
mm,
there's so much an element of like MTV editing and music being
mm.
such an important part of that show, which again, Michael Mann EP'd. And because Fincher started in music videos, I wonder if that is sort of the parallel there because
Yeah,
they both use music in different forms, but both use music so much in their films.
yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. All right. Should we move on to phase two?
Yeah, let's move on to his second phase. So this is The Last of the Mohicans, Heat, The Insider, Ali, and then Collateral. So this is phase two. This is when he is truly at the top of his game, working with
Bangers.
biggest stars in the world from, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro in Heat, Insider Pacino again and Russell Crowe, Ali, Will Smith, Collateral, Tom Cruise, Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis. And these are all major box office hits, big critical acclaim. Like he really was on top of the world. And they're all, like you said, bangers. These are this is his masterpiece phase. I mean, you cannot argue that these are not some of the greatest American films of all time, and all coming from him in this one time period of 90s and early 2000s. So what are the standouts here? It sounds like this is maybe when you came to Man, like
Yeah.
in this time period.
I mean, these are all incredible. Ali maybe works to
Less so.
varying
Yeah.
degrees, less
Hmm.
so, because I think maybe that's more of an attempt to make like a classic sort of, Hollywood Oscar-y type movie, but
Hmm.
still very well made for sure. But to me, Heat is obviously the standout. That's the one I've
Mm.
seen the most number of times, and it's just watching those two guys together, the whole ensemble cast, Val
Oh yeah.
Kilmer, everybody,
Sizemore. Yeah.
LA, and the iconic chases, the iconic diner scene, like that movie is sort of imprinted and it's still very much part of the cultural consciousness, more so than any Michael Mann movie, I would argue. And the fact that there are talks of Heat 2, I'm
Oh yeah.
excited
It's
about
coming.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think this movie is interesting as well, which again is I'm incredible. Like I love Heat a
Mm.
lot, much like you do. This actually is a remake of a TV movie that he did called LA Takedown that is essentially the same script. Like you can
Huh.
go and see the diner scene, word for word, the same as Pacino and De Niro, but with these other two actors. Again,
Ah,
I'm not trying to slog off these other actors or anything. However, it is so clear you can really tell what real talent is when you compare it to people that are less talented. The movie
uh,
is just not that good. And it's the same
yeah,
movie. I mean, it's shot on a lower budget, but the difference there is just the acting caliber of
yeah,
Pacino, De Niro, Val Kilmer, like you mentioned. It makes such a difference. And it's fascinating just to see, okay, this is a movie that is basically the same script, smaller scale with TV actors and a little bit of bigger scale, but with some of the greatest actors that have ever been on, the silver screen. And you
yeah,
really can see the power of what a good performance does. And then also how Michael Mann, like you mentioned earlier, works with actors and is definitely an actor's director. He can get these performances out of Pacino and De Niro that are some of their best. And they've
yeah,
done some of the best on-screen performances of all time. And these are some of their best works.
yeah. That's amazing. I didn't know about that, but that says a lot, which is why I think it's in the latter phase of his career, it's maybe I'm sure a little bit of Michael Mann, but also some of
Hmm.
the casting choices that probably don't work very
Mm,
well versus in
right.
this case that works really well. But yeah, this whole stretch is pretty incredible across the board. We covered Collateral in a previous episode,
Hmm.
which to me is probably Tom Cruise's best, one of the best LA movies ever made. That's
Yep.
the episode we had this for. It's fun to see someone like Daniel Day-Lewis working with Michael Mann as well.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe the only historical epic Michael Mann has done. So that's kind of cool as well. I haven't seen the movie in a long time. Probably should go and rewatch it. But yeah, this is like the height of his powers for sure.
No, definitely. And we also talked about The Insider on another
Right.
episode as well, like I mentioned. So I won't get into those films because we've covered them, but I'll definitely talk about Mohicans a bit. I think that movie is also just incredible. And it's just interesting to see him take his style and his themes and move from, present day, which is,
Right.
other than The Keep, all this is his first phase movies are set in the present move it into the past and it still work. And he still gives like just gives us an incredible picture that is epic on scale, great action, but also again a man kind of fighting against both the colonial powers and then also this rival Indian tribe in Natty Bumppo, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. And the last 10 minutes of that movie, which is on no dialogue. It's just a chase sequence into the
Yeah,
hills through the woods with this incredible score. Is again like one of my top
that I've seen.
10,
Yeah,
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 amazing scenes of all time. And it is again Michael Mann at the top of his powers, like you said, just gorgeous shots of the New England countryside and just incredible. But you wouldn't think a guy who had before that made a serial killer movie in Manhunter
right.
could jump into the past and use all of still techniques and still just blow it out of the water. I mean, I yeah, that movie is a 10 out of 10 too. It's so good.
Yeah, what a great phase. But from here on out, we enter in, I guess, the phase we are currently in.
Yeah, yeah, phase three. So this is Miami Vice, Public Enemies, Black Hat, and then soon to be Ferrari. And this phase is like you were hinting at, I think, is definitely less successful commercially. None of these three films were a huge hit. I mean, Public Enemies did really well because off the backs of Johnny Depp, but it wasn't
Mm,
as big of a hit as the films in the 90s. They were not no longer, major awards contenders like all of his films in the 90s kind of were, at least in those considerations. And definitely, I think people, even big fans, were starting to of Michael Mann, were starting to wonder, like, is he did he lose his way or not in this phase? And I think another thing that's really key to point out as well is that starting with Ali, really cemented in this phase was his use of HD photography over film. Like he was one of the early proponents to switching over. Used it in Ali. Collateral. Most of the movie was shot in HD, and I think that gives the sense of that weird sort of LA where it's never really dark at night. That purple
mm,
haze. It's such a great use of HD.
mhm,
But then controversially uses it for Public Enemies, which is a historical film set in
mhm.
that time period of the 30s, but it's shot on digital and it looks like it's shot on digital. And he did that to make the film more resonant and feel more real instead of the ways that a lot of directors, oh, it's sepia tone and we're making it look like
Right.
it's in the past. He wanted to bring a sense of urgency and relevancy to the tale. I think it works, honestly, the use of HD at least. I mean, that film is not one of my favorite ones of his, but I think he was unfairly kind of maligned for the use of HD in that film. But I don't know. I'll actually stand up for all three of these films. I mean, Miami Vice is especially is the director's cut version that I'll talk about is one of my favorite movies. Actually, it's definitely all about the vibes and the mood. There's not much on the plot. The acting is super subtle between
Mm,
Colin Farrell, who does an incredible job, even though the whole time I guess he was drunk and doesn't remember filming it because he was that was during his
yep.
low period in terms of his addiction. And there's a lot of problems on set here with dealing with hurricanes. Jamie Foxx walking off the picture halfway through because he didn't feel safe. He just left because they were shooting in Central America and there were like a shooting that was going on near the set. And he's like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm not going to make this
Mhm.
movie anymore. So they had to kind of cobble together an ending that was not what they originally planned. But I still it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's literally the style is dialed up to 1,000, and I just want to be enveloped in this world. And there is substance to this movie too, but I think this was taking style to the extreme in terms of
Mm,
how he dealt with this one. Just I want to just be in this world of this Miami Beach. This aesthetic is just incredible, and the HD photography in Miami and then in Central America is just some beautiful, like absolutely beautiful
mhm.
to behold.
Yeah,
Incredible. So
I
I'll
haven't
I'll
seen
defend this one.
any of these, but I should probably go and see them because I've heard defenders from, all across for each of these, which I guess says a lot, right? That people really care for Michael Mann and what he puts out there. And even if these movies may not be universally appreciated or beloved, they are cult movies in their own right, and
Mhm.
including Black Hat, which I keep hearing that there's like a director's cut of that, which seemingly is way better.
Yes, yeah, I will say I'll defend that movie too. I mean, it's not one of my favorites either, but it's definitely not as much of a failure as people said, and I think it is due to the director's cut. So that actually just came out on Blu-ray for the first time 2 weeks
Hmm.
ago, so it's relatively recent a release. And I did rewatch the director's cut, which I'd seen a bootlegged version of it a couple years back, and it's much better film as a director's cut. It's still not one of my favorites. I think something you were hinting at earlier is he's not maybe acting or using the top actor in talent in
Right.
this phase as much. Though I will say it's mainly just Black Hat. I think you look at Johnny Depp, Colin Farrell, and Jamie Foxx. I mean, you can't get bigger than that on those first two films. But yeah, Black Hat, it is a little bit of a step down
Yeah.
on Chris Hemsworth, who is fine in it. But I mean, I can imagine that being another actor with a little more chops that could carry that film a little bit more. But I definitely recommend checking out the director's cut. Like, don't even bother with the theatrical version of
Yeah.
Black Hat. But the director's cut is good. Like, again, I'll defend all three of these. I'm a huge Michael Mann defender, apologist, whatever you want to say. But I highly recommend people look at, especially Miami Vice. Just make sure it's the director's cut version.
Yeah, it sort of says something about kind of the times that we are living in, that we are no longer in the movie star period, right? And
Right, right.
you could argue that a lot of Michael Mann's success, in fact, you just said that with the Heat example, that the previous version of the movie was just with lesser actors, lesser movie stars, and it doesn't work as well. And so maybe that's a big part of sort of what has happened with at least this last chapter. And,
Hmm.
we'll see what happens with Ferrari, but of all these, it sounds like Black Hat got the most amount of heat, no pun intended,
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's a
right?
giant
Which
flop.
is
Yeah, a
giant
huge
flop,
flop. Yeah.
and I think Chris Hemsworth, who's fine, that's the word I would use for him. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
a lot of these directors, they tried to make something out of him more than Thor, right? Like with other movies like Rush or the Shipwreck movie. There are
Oh,
a
Heart of the
bunch of
Sea. Yeah.
right, there are a
Yep.
bunch of movies that are outside of MCU that and none of them worked
Hmm.
because people thought that oh, we could have like a legitimate bona fide movie star here. And he is, but he's not, in the same league as the people we had before, obviously,
No,
by
definitely not.
far. Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point that you're raising. Like, in the, if because he did rely so much, especially at the height of his powers, Michael Mann,
Yeah.
on these stars that are also great
And
actors,
actors.
stars that
Yeah.
are right. They're both. And if we don't have that really anymore, then without the star, you can't bring in the box office. And then if if you're just relying on a person that has a little bit of a star but not the acting chops like Hemsworth, then the performance isn't as good. So
Yeah.
maybe he's a victim of just the change of the industry in terms of how the
Yeah.
industry's going. Like, it's harder for him to do what he does so well. But like you said, we'll see with Ferrari. I mean, Adam Driver is not a movie star. I think he's more of an actor than a movie star. But the movie still looks great. And Penelope Cruz is also just a fantastic
Hmm.
actress. So we'll see what
And
he
she is a
gets
movie
out of
star,
him.
I would
She is.
argue.
Yeah, I would argue, yeah, she'd be a movie star. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So then
And I
actually,
guess Driver now is a movie star.
you think so?
I think so. All the people that we have right now, how many
Mm,
people
mm,
have, you could say are in that league who've worked with
that's
top
true.
directors, also been in a Star Wars series and are known because of that. Like there are very few people, if anybody else in that register. I mean, I guess he's it. You could
Maybe Oscar
maybe
Isaac,
say
maybe would be
I was thinking
similar.
of him, but
Maybe.
he hasn't had the same level of exposure the
No,
way Adam Driver has.
that's true. That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens with Farrar. I'll definitely be there. Maybe not Christmas Day, but day after. Checking that out. So speaking of the future, what would you this is the part of the episode where we talk about, what we'd like to see this director do or give him or her advice on what they should do. What are your thoughts on Man?
The tough one. I kind of feel like sort of going back to his present day, set in LA
Hmm.
vibe is what I would like to see him. So in some ways, like if there are talks of Heat 2,
Oh yeah, that's
I think
happening.
that's the
Yeah.
exact direction I want him to go to. Because even Ferrari is a period movie, right? In a
Hmm.
different time and
Right.
such. It'll be fun for him to get back to present day, working with top talent that we have right now,
Hmm.
you know, using the music we have today, maybe work with speaking of Fincher, work with Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, and see what that
Interesting.
collaboration might lead to. So yeah, that's what I would like him to do. What about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. Just do what he's gonna do, which is Heat 2. I think
Yeah.
in terms of like box office, that is his probably most iconic film. So having
Yeah.
a sequel to it, I think will help bring him back some commercial success that would help him then get some more blank checks afterwards to do some more interesting projects. Though he is really old, so I'm not sure how many more
Yeah.
movies he wants to make. But I have not read Heat 2, but I heard it's great. Like, the novel came out this year and it's got really good reviews. That this
Mm,
isn't like sort of a knockoff cheap sequel. This is actually
mm.
something that is worthy of being made into a film. This is what I've heard. Again, I haven't read it. So I'm definitely excited that does seem to be like the next project he's doing. I mean, it's like they're casting it and it's gonna happen, which is great
It's
because
Driver and Oscar Isaac, right?
yeah, yeah.
Which are two of my favorite actors working right now. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, we'll see how well. I mean, the fact that Driver's coming back
Yeah.
after working with him on Ferrari means that must have been a good collaboration for
Yeah,
both of them, and they were happy
exactly.
with the output because he doesn't use actors often twice. Now that I think
Right.
about it, Michael Mann doesn't. I mean, if Jamie Foxx, I guess, was in Ali and Collateral, I'm sorry, Ali, Collateral, and then also Miami Vice.
Right.
There was a bit of a period he had with Jamie Foxx, but it's not like he ever worked with Tom again or Depp again, or I
Yeah,
guess
he doesn't come
Pacino he
back.
did twice, Heat
Right.
and Insider. But yeah, it's rare does he go back to the well like a Scorsese with a Leo or we
Yeah,
I think that
I'm
speaks
excited for
good. I
that.
think it's a good thing.
The other thing I would want him to maybe do, because he's done past period movies, but it'll be fun to see like a Michael Mann sci-fi epic of
Oh,
sorts,
interesting.
you
Like a
know, set in
future.
a future, but has kind of LA vibes to this future. Not dystopian per se. I'm not thinking Blade Runner-y, but I don't know. What would a Michael Mann sci-fi movie look
Yeah.
like? That would
That
be
that
pretty
is
cool.
yeah, that would. I mean, he one of his styles too is all, like very grounded in like there's a very sense of reality in all of his
Right.
movies that is very grounded, even though there's a lot of melodramatic flares to the
Mhm.
filming techniques and things. But it would be interesting to see then how he takes that to a sci-fi. I'd
Future.
imagine something like a Children of Men in terms of
Yeah,
incredibly
Children of
like
Men
grounded,
meets Tron is
realistic.
what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that he's never kind of gone in that direction or felt like he wanted to, I guess, go outside of just dramas. Like he makes dramas that are just in, that's just his wheelhouse, I guess. But yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see if what sci-fi would look like for him. But I guess both of us are getting our wish with Heat too. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll be talking about that episode on the podcast in like a year or two about how great Heat 2 was.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was our episode on Michael Mann. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and we hope you enjoy Ferrari. We are certainly looking forward to it. As always, please rate and review us at all the podcast platforms as well as YouTube. That really helps listeners find us, and drop us a comment on YouTube as to how you're feeling about these actor filmmaker episodes that we've been doing lately. Till next time, we'll see you soon.
See you soon. I'm a fiend for mojitos. Just the best line of all time.